I'm Bobby Cronin, and I teach pop rock, musical theater, audition, and I write some of the scores for the films at the New York Film Academy. My background is technically as a director, and the Yale's program as a director, you had to study acting. And then I knew I wanted to do musical theater. Yale did not have musical theater. So I then got to have my music minor turned into a double major in the theater program. So I left with quite an extensive knowledge of music and theater. And I had like Maury Yeston was my professor who wrote Titanic. And so as a kid, it was all ear. I had no piano lessons, no nothing. And I think that's actually helped tremendously, is that I'm not bound by the rules, but I know the rules. But I let my ear do most of the work. I would say it switches all the time. Most of the time it's story, because I've gotten to the point where time is really important. So I know that if I'm going to write something, it has to be very specifically for a moment. And that's what makes a good song anyway. And that's what I was mentioning. You can be a songwriter, but that doesn't necessarily mean that writing for musical theater or writing for film is the same thing. Because you do have to advance the story. The song has to have a different beat at the end than it had at the beginning, or else you're not going anywhere. You're not advancing the story. Which is why, for me, I'm not going to change my answer. It's always the story. Okay. It really is always the story. And then it's how do I enhance the story? How do I come up with the right hook? Because for me, that's everything, the hook. Whether it's a lyric hook or a music hook, something has to have the audience walk out remembering that tune and what it did in the story. I don't just want them to remember the tune, I want them to remember what happened. I would say that using existing material for early projects is excellent. You already have an arc, you already have your characters drawn for you, and then it's you figuring out, how do I want to tell this story? For instance, with Christmas Carol, I wanted it contemporary. How do we make it contemporary? How do we put it in today, but paying respect to the actual property? And coming up with the hook of how to tell that story made it work to keep it contemporary. Well, I think contemporary musical theater is, it yearns for exciting themes, interesting themes, darker themes. You know, it's interesting, if you go back to something like Carousel, it's actually really dark, and I think that people think of the old musicals as, you know, cheesy, and they really weren't. They pushed the envelope a little. What I think we try to do today is to really push it. And why not? Why not push it? So, for instance, with Daybreak, I wanted to explore a struggle with sexuality, whereas in Concrete Jungle, there are two gay characters that's not what they're about. They just happen to be gay. In fact, it's just about love for them. And, but also with Daybreak, I was dealing with suicide and just darkness, mental illness, and why not? You know, why not? These are things that we face every day, and I think we want to be challenged as an audience today. And I also think that things like Netflix, all these shows that are really brave and really pushing the envelope, it's making the audiences want more. They don't want just high kicks and high notes anymore. They want to be challenged. I think that's why Next to Normal did so well, is that not only was it really contemporary, but it really challenged your brain as to what is normal. Advice-wise, get your stuff out there. Listen to people. Work with good people. Surround yourself with people that want greatness for you. And don't sweat the small stuff at all. There's always going to be small stuff. Look to the future build a future, figure out what actors you want to be working with, and approach them. The worst they can say is no, and then they'll recommend somebody, but then they know your name, and that's what's important. But you have to get your stuff out there, and you have to have projects. Don't just have songs, have projects.